the recording. Hello, everyone, and good evening. We are going to be talking about a topic that many of you asked me over Shabbos, which is if I see that it is snowing and I want to, let me just mute everyone because there's lots of background noise. That was a false start. Okay, and unmute when you have questions, but let me cover a little ground, please. So the question that many of you raised to me, in particular, Mike Berg came over and had a whole bunch of questions about putting salt on the ground. Can I shovel snow if it's in my way to get to shul? And I guess, it's Monday night right now. I didn't have a lot of time to put together a nice, beautiful, aesthetically pleasing source sheet. What you'll see that I'll share is a source sheet that I think is nearly completed, but I wasn't able to put the finishing touches on it. So you won't get the same professionalism that you're used to seeing. But nonetheless, I feel that I have gone through enough of the sugya significantly that I can actually weigh in and hopefully give us some guidance, halacha l'maisa, on the questions of A, shoveling snow, and B, salting snow. And each of them has their own unique issues and their own unique potential solutions that we'll put out there on the table. So I guess I'm just going to have to be hopeful that there's another snowstorm. That way these halachas can be applied. Or as Gloria shaking her head is probably saying, we hope there won't be another snowstorm, but in the event there is, at least we'll know the halachos this time around. Okay? So this is the point where you guys can weigh in. What might be the halachic issues that we will have to reckon with? A, in terms of shoveling snow, and B, in terms of salting the snow on Shabbos. And let me expand this, not just snow in terms of salting, but ice as well. And we will see there might be a distinction between snow versus ice for these matters. Okay, you can unmute yourselves, right? What do you think?
Carrying, maybe?
Carrying. Well, I guess let's put it this way, Phyllis. Right. There would be shovel carrying if you don't live within the Erev. But let's presume in Stanford, the Erev, I don't think Erev has ever been down since I came here. So I think carrying is a consideration, but not inherent to this issue here. What can be another consideration, Jake?
Working.
Oh, okay. So what we call uvda dechol. Let's just do one at a time, please. What we have uvda dechol. So, right, strenuous activity on Shabbos we generally prohibit. However, we'll talk about this. We're not going to talk about actually so much, so I'll address it now. Certain strenuous activities like running actually are forbidden on Shabbos unless you're running to shul. So sometimes for a dvar mitzvah, for a mitzvah purpose, we permit things that are somewhat strenuous in nature. But you are correct. When we talked about bicycle riding, uvda dechol was one of the main issues that poskim brought up. So very good, Jake. Okay,
mixing?
So we have from Phyllis and we have uvda dechol from Jake. Susan, what do you got?
Mixing?
What do you mean?
I don't know, mixing the salt with the ice. I don't know.
Okay, well, that is what we're doing, but what would the malacha be? That's the question. So maybe you're thinking of how you're not allowed to make a highly concentrated salt solution on Shabbos. I'm not sure if that's where you're going, but that could be something there. What's another consideration, guys? What else might be an issue? Don't worry if you don't know it, because I'm going to show you right now. So here we go. We're going to look at the issues and then some solutions, or we'll see if there's a real solution in the end. As you can see, I still
sunshine.
What?
Solution is sunshine.
Yeah. So as you can see, the source sheet isn't complete yet. You can see that there's a tshuva from Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank that I haven't put in here because Otzar HaChachma, which is the largest, I think it's the largest online database of Sfarim, was giving me a little trouble today, so I wasn't able to get the tshuva onto here. But nonetheless, 95% of the material we need to go through is on this sheet. So number one, the first question I'm going to ask actually is, and I think, Phyllis, this may have been what you were getting to, not carrying from a hotzah standpoint, but rather from a muksa standpoint. And the question is snow muksa on Shabbos? You know when I get asked this question a lot? not for shoveling, but for?
Snowballs.
Snowballs.
Very good, very good. So as you said, so snowballs. I get asked by a parent, I take my kids sledding on Shabbos? Can kids play with snowballs on Shabbos? We'll get to that in a moment. If you
How
look
about
over here,
plowing?
what?
How about plowing?
With a snowplow?
No, not with a snowplow, with a shovel. You're actually, as you push
Yeah,
the snow.
that's our main case. That's what we're talking about. So the Gemara in Eruvin talks about water. We're not going to get too involved in the sugi over here. Everyone can just remember.
Malacha of plowing. Okay.
We're second. Okay. I'm just going to go for about 10 minutes or so and just try to give us an overview, and then we'll stop for questions. Okay. So the Gemara in Eruvin tells us as follows. Number one, when it comes to mayim, when it comes to water, we are told maya ba'avim midad nadi, that there's no issue of nolad. Now, what's nolad? If the water did not exist on Shabbos and then it came into existence on Shabbos, you would not be allowed to use that water. That water would be muksa. Think of a similar discussion in Beitza, where if a chicken gives birth to an egg on Yom Tov, well, the egg was not yet in existence until it was, came out of the chicken's body. So it's a similar discussion over here regarding water in the clouds. Do we view the clouds as holding the water, meaning the water exists before Shabbos? Or is it some different form and it only gets created once it begins to rain? So the Gemara concludes that the water is already pre-existing, it's just moving around in the clouds, and therefore, when it rains, that water was already there on Shabbos, and water is therefore not muksa. You can see in the Mishnah Berurah over here, the Mishnah Berurah says, "De'ein al matar hayorid shem muksa o nolad." There's no concern of water being muksa or nolad. And you're allowed to wash with it, you're allowed to drink it. You know what? It doesn't even have to be clean, filtrated water, but even water that is disgusting and only an animal would drink from, that still would not be considered muksa. So pretty much unequivocally, water is not muksa on Shabbos. Now the question we have to ask ourselves is moving snow problematic? Is snow muksa on Shabbos? Because after all, when one is plowing, you are moving the snow. So muksa is one of the fundamental questions we have to be asking. If you look at Shmir Shabbos Kehilchasa, he quotes Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach as well, who says that moving snow is not muksa on Shabbos, pretty much for the same reason water is not muksa on Shabbos. Even though he says, maybe when it comes to water, however, water was already in the clouds, but can we really presume that snow was pre-existing in the clouds? I don't know. I guess I'd have to ask a meteorologist how this works. But some of the poskim, as we'll see in a moment, assume that water may have been pre-existing before Shabbos, but the snow did not necessarily exist in the clouds before it begins to snow on Shabbos, which could give us some issues. But nonetheless, Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says that snow, just like rain, is not muksa, and so not only would that lead me to assume that one could shovel their snow on Shabbos if needed, but also, what about the question of a snowball fight? So this is the question that you get asked by children. So what are the issues with making snowballs? Well, there's a few potential issues. One is in the footnote in Shmir Shabbos Kehilchasa, he says there could be an issue of binyan, that you are building a snowball. Also, there might be an issue possibly of disha. We'll talk about this more later when you are compacting the snow together. And then finally, even if it's permissible to make the snowball, or you made the snowball before Shabbos, when you throw the snowball and it hits something and breaks apart, If you hold that making a snowball is binyan, is building, then logically it follows to destroy a snowball is soser, is destruction. And that's breaking something that is built, which is also an Isser Deorisa. That's also forbidden on Shabbos. Nonetheless, Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, Shein lach shosh bekador shelig mishum soser. Nonetheless, he doesn't think that breaking a snowball is called soser. That's not called a Deorisa Isser of destroying something that is previously built. So he doesn't seem to weigh in here on whether you could actually make the snowball initially on Shabbos. Maybe if you have, you prepared your snowballs, you made them on Friday, you put them in the freezer, so then afterwards you can have a snowball fight on Shabbos. I'm just saying that's a lot of dedication over there to make the snowballs before. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, again, I don't know if it's true, but in those neighborhoods in Yerushalayim where they throw rocks at you if you're driving a car on Shabbos. So they place the stones on the side before Shabbos, so they're not muksa, so they designate them for use. I don't know if it's completely analogous, but that's what it reminded me of. So anyway, we have Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach who says, just like water's not muksa, so too snow's not muksa, and that bodes well for those who want to argue that you can plow, that you can shovel your snow. However, there is a contention to this. There are two arguments against shoveling the snow, particularly from a muksa standpoint. So Ramosha Feinstein, which should be obvious to us, is obviously a heavyweight, even though he might be in the minority. Ramosha Feinstein says that actually Havi muksa the Havi Nolan, that unlike rain, snow actually would be muksa on Shabbos because it only comes into creation on Shabbos. He says the Eino Kegeshem, it's not like rain. What's it mean it's not like rain? Yitachein shekavanaso shesheleg sheba'avim vadei shekamanda leisa dami. That unlike rain, where Moshe Feinstein seems to be saying, unlike rain that pre-exists in the clouds and just waiting for the opportunity to fall out of the clouds and come out in rain, the snow is not sitting in the clouds, but the snow becomes created on Shabbos as it begins to snow. So since the snow did not exist prior to Shabbos, therefore it is no lot. It only came into existence on Shabbos and thus has a din of muksa. Thus, one would not be allowed to move snow around. So Moshe says, you're right. The Gemara says, black and white, that rain, that water is okay. But snow, however, is muksa. Now, here's the thing. In Orchos Shabbos, is a contemporary halacha sefer, he says, is that really true? If we look at the Gemara, do you really get the sense that snow is muksa? I'll teach you a halacha in the Gemara that doesn't relate directly to the question of muksa, but presupposes that you're allowed to move around snow on Shabbos. Where do we see that? Well, this Gemara here is going to be very important. The Gemara in Masechah Shabbos says as follows: the ein meraskin loas hashag loas habar b'Shabbos b'shvil sheyizuva meimav. One is not allowed to squeeze snow, to squeeze ice, hail, in order so that it should melt, in order to extract liquid. But what you are allowed to do is you're allowed to take the snow, put it on a plate, and let it melt on its own. You're not allowed to actively melt the snow by crushing it, but you're allowed to put it somewhere where it will passively melt on its own. We'll get into the reasoning why, God willing, soon. But the important point to take away from this is that whether I'm allowed to crush snow or not, even if I'm not allowed to do that, which the Gemara says, it presupposes that I'm allowed to move the snow around. Because if I could even have a havamina, if I could have even thought that it's possible for me to crush the snow, that presupposes that I'm allowed to move around the snow. So this Gemara in Shabbos would seem to indicate that snow is not muksa. And in fact, that's what the Orchos Shabbos says here in source number 7. However, he does not conclude this way. The Orchos Shabbos says that whereas snow back in the day, I'll read it for you. So the Orchos Shabbos says, you know what? let's say that's true. Back in the days of the Talmud, snow was not muksa. You got me there. The Gemara seems to indicate that. But I'll make an argument why, even if in the times of the Talmud, snow was not muksa, today times have changed. We assume sometimes that if we believe that we can change halacha based on modern day standards, that always works lakula as a leniency. I'm just saying, like, if you believe that things can change over time, you got to be consistent even when it's not in your favor. And here's a good example of that. What was the svara that it wasn't muksa back then? Because snow had a use. If you crush the snow, you can drink the liquid from it. But nowadays, no one really does that. Snow is not analogous to water. Rainwater is ready for use immediately in its current form. Whereas when it comes to snow, the snow in front of us, as it is in its current state, is not consumable. It's not edible. No one drinks snow directly. And if you look at the Gemara in Nida, now, you might make the argument, okay, majority of people in the world don't drink snow. You don't melt it to drink, most people. But maybe it shouldn't be muksa because children use the snow. But you can't make that argument. Just because kids like to play in the snow doesn't mean that snow is not muksa. You're going to say all the snow in the world is not muksa because a bunch of kids like to play in the snow? That's what he argues. Furthermore, who says what the kids are doing are right? We saw Rosh Hashanah Orbach before, but remember we saw in that footnote in Shmir Shabbos Kihilchasa? It's not obvious that one is allowed to make snowballs and allowed to play in the snow on Shabbos. So just because some people are using the snow doesn't mean they're appropriately using it. And it's usher to make snowballs, make snow angels, to make igloos in the snow and make snowmen, then it still is muksa because it has no use on Shabbos. And so, and he quotes Rav Yossi Shom Eliyashiv. He had said Shlita, but now it's Zechron Levracha. Shashelag eno muksa eladino kamayim. So shelag is, but he holds that shelag actually is not muksa and has a din of water. Now, so basically, what I want us to take out from here is that there are arguments both ways, and there's a debate whether snow is considered muksa or not. And based on where you fall on this, if you hold that snow is indeed muksa, you're going to have a hard time justifying plowing the snow, shoveling the snow on Shabbos. So that's number one. There is a leniency around there, but let me just pause for questions. Let me see if I can allow everyone to unmute. Okay, Toby, looks like you're raising your hand. You just got to unmute yourself first. I just enabled you. You should be able to unmute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the opinion that said that it was muksa because it wasn't formed before Shabbos, what if the snow fell before Shabbos? And, let's say it fell at, Shabbos was at 5 and the snow came down at 4.
That's an excellent point, Toby, an excellent point. According to Rav Moshe Feinstein, who makes that argument that the snow didn't exist before Shabbos, then seemingly any snow that fell, if let's say it snowed on Thursday and it's just still there on Shabbos, it should be permissible according to him. You're absolutely correct. That would seem to be what Rav Moshe would have to hold, just with the data we're given. Now, you're right, according to that reasoning. According to the second reasoning given by the Orchos Shabbos, it wouldn't matter whether it snowed on Shabbos or before Shabbos. It just snow doesn't have a utility that's permissible on Shabbos and thus is considered muksa. Zaidi.
My second question, just quickly, what about the shovel? Why isn't the shovel muksa?
Well, it goes either way. If snow is not muksa and you're allowed to shovel, the shovel wouldn't be muksa because it serves a permissible purpose. We have to investigate whether there's an issue of muksa and potentially other issues with moving snow, but it's similar to a broom. Broom actually is gets into a whole
The
other.
broom is different, but like, is a shovel in the summertime muksa? Because what would you do with a shovel in the
I got
summer?
what you're saying. So I'm thinking of like a snow shovel. They're like shovels, as you know, that are designated specifically for the snow. Are you asking like just a usual shovel that you can use to dig a pit in your backyard if you want? So
Yeah,
that might be a klish malachto le'isser. So it might be analogous to a hammer, which usually is used for a forbidden purpose on Shabbos, but for a permissible purpose, let's say heter, to crack open a walnut, you'd be allowed to use it. So arguably, you might be able to do it with a regular shovel, but I'd imagine most of us who plan on actually shoveling out our lawn, or not our lawn, lawn might be even worse, than using a snow shovel dedicated for the purpose is permissible on the assumption that you're allowed to move snow. So, Papa Hatalia, Zadie, you just got to mute, Zadie, the microphone icon on the bottom left. Just got to click the microphone icon on the bottom left of your screen. Oh, very good. You got it.
Okay, this old Boy Scout, when hiking in the woods and not carrying a canteen of water, has put snow in his mouth, not in huge quantities because it could get to be uncomfortable, but it provided something to drink. Also, we've been talking about muksa. What about the 39 categories of work? Would shoveling snow fall into one of those?
Yeah. So there's going to be a concern of maybe being mashava gumos, that you are flattening out the earth as you do it. That's a concern that's brought up. It's mitigated. So there's a Taz, I didn't get onto the sheet, that says that, here's a question. Why am I allowed to, I'm not allowed to dig on Shabbos. I'm not allowed to drag a bench across the ground and make it a hole in it. So why am I allowed to walk to shul on Shabbos in the snow if I'm making holes in the ground? So there's a few answers, but one that's really great, given by the Taz, at least he cites it, I believe, is that Chazal were not goes there on snow because it's impossible, since they knew it's impossible not to make a hole in the snow when you're walking through it, they said that it's permissible to do so. So arguably, if you're allowed to walk through the snow, one can make the argument that plowing also would not fall under that prohibition. But yeah, so you're right to ask about other 39 malachos, but it seems that muksa seems to be the prime issue over here. Very good. Any other questions before we go forward? Because I have a solution I want to share with you. Okay, you guys want to?
So does it matter if you're walking through the snow or if you're pushing it to the side or, doing anything with it? Or do we get?
Yeah. So walking would be okay. That's the consensus opinion, that walking would be okay. Otherwise, it's like you'll be like all the people who didn't come to shul this. I'm just joking.
So
I know.
making a snowman.
I'm well aware that many of you physically cannot make it to shul in the snow, and I don't want to make you feel that.
What
Yeah.
snow? Sheet of ice. Sheet of ice. Sheet of ice. Snow is okay.
Right.
Sheet of ice was an issue.
It's more the younger people who are my age who I know would be out in that weather if it was for recreational activity that I'm talking about. You guys, you played safe. Okay. Now let me get to the answer. Let's get to the answer. Everyone, I'll just mute, but just okay. And I'll pause for questions. Let's cover a little bit more material now. So the Taz says there's something called tiltum in atzad. I think, do we do muksa b'nei halacha? I feel like we must have done muksa. Baruch Hashem, we've covered so many different sections of halacha, but I'm fairly confident we did hilchos muksa together. The Taz says, you know what? The Taz is not talking about our case. The case that Taz is addressing is a case in Shulchan Aruch where you have some leftover bones on your table, things that are muksa, and so about tiltul min hatzad. Okay, let's grant the machmir opinion. Let's assume that snow is indeed a muksa, but I can find a leniency built into hilchos muksa that would allow me to move it. What's that called? Tiltum min hatzad. Actually, we talked about this in our Mishnah class recently. I think we talked about Tiltum and Atzad. So Tiltum and Atzad is, let's say, where's them? I have a pencil over here, and I have this magazine. This is Marissa's Consumer Reports magazine. So, and the pencil's on top. I want the magazine, which is not muksa, and I don't want the pencil. So I can pull the magazine, and the pencil will fall. But since I'm not moving the muksa item directly, I'm moving it by way of taking the permissible item. Therefore, it would be okay due to the principle of tiltul min hatzad, a built-in dispensation that Chazal built into muksa. So usually we say, if I take a broom and I push something that's muksa with it, usually we consider that to be directly my force, and that's a direct action. But there is a shita of the Taz, which we don't usually paskin like, who says, Nira dehua din imavirim adi davar acher. If you, as long as your hands are not touching the muksa directly, if you're just, using like, I'm trying to think, what would you hold on? Like a broom or a knife? Well, he says it himself. I don't need to make it up. For instance, use a knife, which is not muksa, to move the muksa item for you. The mutar came to Lo. Why is it permissible to do that act? Because you are not touching the muksa item directly. So therefore, havale tiltal min atzad mutar. Therefore, you're allowed to move the bones and residue that's on your table that you want to get rid of. What's the connection we can make over here? The connection that many suggest is same thing over here with snow. Even if I can see to Moshe Feinstein, even if I can see to Orchos Shabbos and the poskim who are machmer on this, that muksa, that snow is indeed muksa. But since I'm moving it with a shovel, and the shovel is touching the snow, not me directly, that's called tiltul min hatzad, and I'd be allowed to clear my walkway from the snow on Shabbos. There's a few assumptions over here. We generally don't paskin this way. We generally assume that even if I use a shovel, that's still called a direct action. What do we usually consider tiltul min hatzad? When I indirectly move it. But here, you're directly moving the snow just by way of shovel. But nonetheless, this Taz is on the books. And so what you'll find is that it's used as a sniff lahakel. A sniff lahakel just means an added consideration. We wouldn't necessarily rely on this Taz on its own, but if we have other mitigating considerations, we can be mitzdarif it. We can kind of bring in all these minor considerations, and then they add up. So for instance, let's say generally I can't ask a non-Jew to do work for me on Shabbos, but a non-Jew doing work for me is a tier down from me doing it directly. It's only rabbinically forbidden. So if I ask a non-Jew to do tiltul min hatzad for me to shovel, so then that may very well be permissible. Arguably, you can do it. The other end, of course, if someone is in danger, by the way, I need to pause at this point. If someone is in actual pikuach nefesh, if someone's in life-threatening, or someone might suffer a serious injury, then there's no discussion over here. But in theory, we could all make the decision. I mean, as much as I encourage people to go to shul, in theory, if it's usher to shovel the snow, I don't have to put myself in a makom sakana and slip on my way to shul. I have the choice to stay home rather than do a malacha. It's only if we can justify shoveling that I'd be allowed to shovel. So, but if something's pikuach nefesh, if there is ice right in front of the shul, for instance, and we assume there's a very good chance that someone could slip on the black ice there, then you could get rid of that ice because of pikuach nefesh. But
Rabbi,
we're
doesn't
assuming
going to shul justify?
What?
Sorry. Doesn't going to shul justify the need to shovel so that
Very good, Phyllis. So what Phyllis is arguing is, wait, maybe we could rely on a das yachid, on a minority position, because going to shul is a dvar mitzvah. So perhaps for fulfilling a dvar mitzvah of going to shul, to davening tefillah b'tzibur, it could justify us relying on a more lenient position that we generally don't paskin like. It's an excellent suggestion. And I think that's the direction that those who would permit it would go in. So let's see if I had anything else over here. Okay, so there's a discussion in Ritzi Pesach Frank about shoveling. I didn't get through the whole piece, but there's a discussion between him and I think his grandkids who wrote the footnotes on the Sefer. And there's real halach l'maisa discussions. But point being is, there's a question if the snow is muksa, and even if it is muksa, there's still so good. This is also our framework here. We kind of have I guess you could say a spake on halacha, a double down. One reason to be lenient is, number one, snow might not be muksa at all. And even if it is muksa, I still have a task to rely on that shoveling is tiltul min hatzad. So because of this speka, so to speak, it could permit someone to shovel in extenuating circumstances. Now, you need to judge for yourself how badly that shoveling needs to take place. Every case needs to be assessed on its own, but I'm putting those considerations out there. Okay, that's question number one. Question number one was shoveling. There is a reasonable basis to permit shoveling in a situation of need. The second question I want to deal with is the question of salting. Now, this gets a little bit more complicated halachically. What's the issue potentially with salting snow on Shabbos? So, to see what the issue is, we actually learned the Gemara already. Remember that Gemara we brought up in Shabbos? It said, one is not allowed to crush snow or hail in order to turn it into water. So let me ask you a question. The same way I'm not allowed to crush ice, or I'm not allowed to crush snow and to render it into a liquid, would I also not be permitted to salt the snow or ice in order to render it into a liquid? Would you say that salting is analogous to crushing it? You get the same result, no? You hear the connection, right? Make sense? Get some nods? Okay. So the same way you can't crush snow to turn it into water, maybe I should be able to salt snow to turn it into water. So it depends on why I'm not allowed to crush snow. There are two reasons given. One reason, Rashi on the Gemara, as well as the Sefer HaTrumos quoted in the Ramban, says that it's our good old friend of Mishum Nolad. What's the concern? Well, the concern is you're not allowed to take something, midrabanan, you're not allowed to take something and make it into something new on Shabbos. So to take ice and to take snow, which is in one form, and to crush it and render it into water by pushing it with friction, that is taking something that's snow before Shabbos and turning it into water on Shabbos. And that is a prohibition of Nolad.
Yeah, but Rabbi, what if you drink, you have ice cubes and
Okay,
you're drinking
we'll
on
get to that.
Shabbos?
Let's just finish our frame. If you just give me a few minutes and just let me
Sorry.
explain the section, I'll take a few questions. So the Rashba gives a different reason behind it, which I think many of the Rishonim seem to indicate they follow, that the concern isn't Nolad, but actually it's akin to a form of schita, of dush, that one's not allowed to squeeze fruit to extract their juice on Shabbos. Now you're going to ask me, how do we permit lemons? The way you do with lemons is that you're supposed to squeeze it into sugar or to another solid. It goes from one solid to another solid, it's not an issue. Leave that for another share. But one's not allowed to extract liquids on Shabbos. And so crushing the snow to extract the liquid is a form of squeezing it, of schita, which is forbidden. So being forbidden midrabbanan mishum schita. So here is my suggestion. Depending on why crushing ice to make water is forbidden, can tell us whether salting ice and snow is problematic. If it's because of Nolad, that you're taking the snow and turning it into water, it doesn't matter if you do it via crushing it or if you do it by salting it. The point is, you did an act that took something from one state of matter and turned it into another state of matter. Whereas if you say, like the Rashba, that the prohibition of crushing ice is because you're squeezing it. It's like you're squeezing and extracting the liquid. Salting snow is not an act of extraction. You're not pushing the snow with friction to turn it into water. So if you say the issue is mishum schita, so then salting would not fall into the same trap as crushing the snow. And salting the snow may very well be permitted. So let me just tie it into the Shulchan Aruch and Mishnah Brura, and then I will pause. So the Shulchan, this seems to be actually machlokes, the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. The Shulchan Aruch would rule leniently because he assumes that the issue is schita. Therefore, he says, that you be even allowed to actually take snow or ice and put it near put it near heat or the sun so that it melts on its own. Why would you be allowed to do that? Because that's not an act of extraction. It's melting. It's not about the result. It's about the act. You're not actively squeezing and extracting the liquid. However, the Mishnah Brura cites the Ramah, who says that even if it passively melts on its own, if you caused it to slowly passively melt on its own, that's forbidden. Why? Because it's not about how you do it. It's about the result of your action. And whether it's by squeezing or whether it's by salting, you are turning the snow or ice into a liquid, into something new on Shabbos. So that would seem to be the machlokis that we have here. Depending on why crushing ice is forbidden, informs us of whether salting it would be the same problem. Now, I know I just threw a lot out at you over there, so let me just pause. I think, Phyllis, you had a question before. Do you want to go first?
Okay, what I was asking is what are the mitigating circumstances, like shoveling snow? I was thinking that if you, let's say a woman is, pregnant, and she's going through early stages of delivery, she doesn't have to go to the hospital, but she's going to have to go to the hospital, and you shovel with snow.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, in these kind of cases where there's extenuating circumstances, you're right. We take that into account. I mean, we call a taxi on Shabbos to bring a woman to the hospital who's beginning to go into labor. So to shovel snow, which at worst would seemingly be an Isser D'Rabbanan, should be no different. I mean, I hope she doesn't need to shovel that snow all on her own as she's starting to go into labor. But
then she'll go into labor faster.
Whoever's with her hopefully can be doing it.
Will happen faster.
Yeah. Zadie, and then Bruce, and then Toby.
In terms of salting, or more likely these days, ice melt. For example, in my house, I got 100 feet of sidewalk running parallel with the road. If I have ice there, people are liable to slip on it and fall and get hurt.
Right.
To prevent injury, I'm talking about Sarkana, can I put some sort of chemical on the ice so that it will melt and people don't get hurt? Or going into the shul, people don't slip and
Perfect
fall.
question.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say like this: Halakha l'maisa, we have access to weather reports. So halakha l'maisa, if one has the foresight, the salt should be put out before Shabbos. No question, if you can put it out before Shabbos, that saves us from all the problems. Now, the question is, you didn't realize it was going to snow, or you only thought later on Shabbos to put it on. So then it would seem to get into this question. However, the case you're describing, Zadie, is not that I just want to go ahead and I have a huge property and I'd like to kind of just get the process started. That might be a hachana issue also, preparing for after Shabbos on Shabbos. But here, people are actually in physical danger. Rachmana litzlan, I'm sure if we haven't, then we know someone who has slipped and fallen and got a serious injury on ice. And it's I remember when I was a kid growing up in Darche Middle School, Rabbi Bender gave a shmooze one time, and he was he made us all feel bad that we were happy that it snowed. As kids, we were all, oh, it snowed. Yeah, he's like, all your grandparents are in terror when it snows because they can't walk outside because of it. So then I felt guilty every time it snowed because but it's a real, I don't need a lecture all of you. I mean, you all know that it's a real issue. And so if there is a concern, so this is what Mike Burke said to me when he asked me the question of Shabbos. I said, is the ice really in your way? Are you able to just like hold the railing when you go up? He says, if I pay attention, I'm fine. But the mailman who's coming might not notice it. And so I should put it out to prevent him from injuring himself. So I think it's very obvious to me that if there's a havamina that somebody would be in danger, we already have, again, this is similar to the shoveling discussion. We have a basis to be makel. Now, if you could conceive of a case where there's no danger and you don't need to put out salt for the ice, for instance, let's say there's just like, I'm just making something up. Like, let's say there was a cordon off, like my backyard, right? I don't need to use my backyard on Shabbos. So I can wait to after Shabbos to shovel it. I can wait till after Shabbos to salt it. But my walkway, which someone could conceivably get hurt, since there is a basis to melt it that would permit me to salt it, and it would not be a prohibition, it wouldn't be akin to crushing ice, even though I might be Ashkenazi and following the Ramah, there's certainly, in a case like that, it'd be appropriate to rely on a more lenient shita. Now, I will say, I was looking in the footnotes of the Deorisa Mishnah Berurah. I forgot who they cited it from, but they said that there's actually a difference between snow versus ice. They said that snow, going from ice to water is a bigger change. I mean, it makes sense. From a solid to a liquid, that might be considered a real change. Whereas snow already is categorically considered like water. So to do an act where the snow gets rendered into water, it might not have the same pitfalls of no-lod that we would have from ice to water. Now, it's a little bit of a difficult position to take, because if you look at the Gemara groups together hail and snow. It doesn't differentiate. But I thought I'd throw that one out there. I realize it doesn't help because usually we need the salt dafka for the ice, not for the snow. So again, halacha l'maisa, one should salt before Shabbos, and on Shabbos, strictly places where people are walking is where one could salt. But my backyard, which I could really avoid using throughout until the end of Shabbos, one should not just willy-nilly go around salting things, only what is necessary. And I would say very similar idea for shoveling as well. Ideally, I think at shul, we have a service that shovels and plows for us. So better to have them do it than for us to do it. And, if they decide to come with their actual trucks and do it, there might be issues of avsha milsa, there might be issues of the noise and not having worked on a premises, but certainly they could come with their shovels. We're not asking them to come with the trucks. So I don't actually know what our protocol is at shul for these things. You see, what happens is people always come over to me after davening, because there have been days where there was black ice and the service didn't get there before like the 6:30 shachars to salt and move everything. So people are like, "Oh, Rabbi, it's not salted, it's not salted." I'm like, I don't handle any of these logistics. You can just tell the office. So the office is what handles it. If you tell me, it's just a broken telephone to get to the office. But that's an administrative point. Okay, let me show you one more thing, and then we'll take any last questions and then conclude. So don't take it from me. In the Chuvas of Moshe Stern and Be'er Moshe, he actually says that one is allowed to salt snow as well. Now he asks, so the next sif in the Shulchan Aruch that we were talking about before has a machlokis if one is allowed to urinate in the snow. And it's machlokis if one is allowed to do that. The issue of urinating in the snow versus, back then they didn't have proper bathrooms. There were outhouses, you're on, Zaydi or Boy Scouts, you're on a hike. That's what you got to do. So the issue of urinating in the snow is that the Mishnah Berurah says is a direct action. You're actively melting the snow. So perhaps salting is analogous to urinating in the snow. So the Be'er Moshe answers that lo kasha nidi. This is more akin to taking ice and snow and putting it in the water. You're allowed to take you're allowed to take an ice cube and put it into your drink. It's better actually to put the ice cube into your drink rather than pour your beverage onto the ice. because you pour your beverage onto the ice, you're directly doing an action that's going to cause it to melt. You're pushing force onto it. Whereas dropping the ice into the water, it just slowly dissolves on its own. So one's allowed to do that. Mishum da shagva bar me'elav nimoach. And the spur here is similar as well. The salt, it's not like an immediate action where I'm immediately like crushing it and melting it on the spot. I'm just sprinkling a little snow over there. And then, nature takes its course, and the salt, I still don't understand how it works. I guess it absorbs it. I don't know. But the salt just does what the salt is supposed to do. And on its own, it dissolves the ice, it dissolves the snow. So therefore, he says, whereas urinating on the snow is a direct action where you're immediately melting it. So don't take it just from me. There are achronim, like Ramosha Stern, who say that it is permissible to salt on Shabbos. He does say, albeit one shouldn't do it publicly, or should try to have a guy do it, because many people don't realize that it might be permissible to do it. But again, you could obviously consult Rabbi Cohen in case he has a differing opinion from me. I didn't consult him before giving the shiur. This isn't me giving policy for the shul, but just for each and every one of you, that there's a basis to shovel, there's a basis to salt. There are those who are lenient. If it's bikoach nefesh, if someone's in mortal danger, there's no question you can do it. If there's even a conceivable danger, it'd be permitted as well. But, Shabbos is not the opportunity for me to shovel out my driveway. It's not the opportunity for me to just salt around my whole premises. It would seem to me that one can shovel out their walkway as necessary, and one can salt the icy places that need to be salted to prevent people from being harmed. That's my takeaway from this. Now, there's a few other interesting questions that come up, which I think Phyllis and maybe some others tried to raise, which is not really about snow and ice outside my home, but what about freezing water on Shabbos into ice, right? Let's say I'm out of ice cubes. I want to make ice cubes on Shabbos. So that's a bit of a debate. If the issue, same achlokas, if the issue of crushing ice is because I am extracting liquid from the ice, you're not extracting liquid from ice when you're putting it in the freezer. There's no extraction going on there. But if the issue is no lot, is I'm taking something from one state to another state, so the same way I can't take something from ice, from a solid, turn it into a liquid, I shouldn't be able to take something from a liquid and turn it into a solid by putting it in the freezer because of no lot. However, I think we're in the Shmir Shabbos Hilchos, on the footnotes, it talks about how going from ice to liquid is an improvement because liquid is the ideal state for water, whereas liquid to solid to ice is not an ideal state of matter for it, and therefore it might be permissible. Okay, one basically should licharchila not try to make ice on Shabbos. That's now another interesting thing that comes out from Nolad is making seltzer on Shabbos with the what's the Israeli brand called? Mitchell, you're from our Israel committee.
Soda Stream.
Soda Stream. Thank you, Susan. Soda Stream. So I think also I was seeing the footnotes in Deorisa, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Well, in Shmir Shabbos Hilchos, I believe he's quoted as saying that one can make Soda Stream, one can make seltzer on Shabbos, because pushing bubbles into the water is not making something new. It's still fundamentally a beverage. Taking something from liquid to solid or solid to liquid is creating something new, a no lot on Shabbos. But Soda Stream would be permissible because it's still fundamentally the same beverage, just now it's carbonated. One last interesting thing that comes out from this sugya that I'll share is ice cream on Shabbos. So do we run into the same issue of ice cream? So ice cream might be fundamentally considered like a liquid, and to go from ice cream form to liquid form might not be problematic. That's not considered no lot. So those are all the cases that those are a bunch of cases that come out from here. But I think, I hope I was clear on the salting and shoveling issue, as well as these last little tidbits that I sprinkled in here at the end. But just let me pause for a few minutes before Mark Waxel begins his Navi shiur. Do we have any questions that I could address at this point?
Yeah, what about the noise that the Soda Stream makes when you make the seltzer?
So what Phyllis mentions is that there's an issue called afsha milsa, that one is not supposed to have very, noisy equipment running on Shabbos, like a mill. So that's a similar question of
play an instrument.
running a washing machine, running a dishwasher on Shabbos. Interesting. I actually didn't consider the option mills a consideration. It would seem that many don't consider a problem because it's just a brief noise, so it doesn't disturb the overall ambiance, perhaps. That might be the argument. It's a good point. I didn't consider that, Phyllis. Any other questions? Toby, is that a, you're muted? Or is that like, I'm done?
No. I have like multiple questions and comments. First of all, I'll start with the comment because this is the easiest on the issue of, salting or doing something with your sidewalk. Just pointing out that in many locations, I know it's like this in New York and it's definitely like this in Stamford. It is the law that the property owner has to do something about their adjacent sidewalk, or they could be held legally liable. It wasn't the law. Certainly, if somebody falls and it's, let's say, your walkway or your something, you could be sued.
So that's why we have the personal injury attorney on here.
Right. So is that a valid basis for doing something? That's my first question.
I think you have
Second
12
question.
hours to do it in.
What?
You have to do it within 12 hours.
Okay, so let's assume that it snowed overnight and now we're talking about 9 in the morning,
Yeah.
So I'll say yes and no. I would say if it was purely just like a concern that maybe you'll get fined, it's much harder to permit. Well, again, it would be, you would make the calculus like this. If the fine is a hefsim meruba, you're going to get a hefty fine. You could say,
Breaking up, Rabbi.
I rely on a makel shita. But nonetheless, I mean, the reason they're requiring it, it's moot anyway. The reason they're requiring it is because of the bikuach nefesh concern. So I think anywhere that they would require you to salt is likely a place that someone could possibly be endangered. And so for that reason, one would be allowed to salt it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So second of all, in terms of your own property, if the issue, like I had this past Shabbos, I was totally a shut-in all of Shabbos because my property was absolutely encased in ice. I wanted to go to shul. How important was that? I didn't go. I ended up not going. And would it have been a difference if I was a man and would have been making the minyan or,
I think that's a great question, Toby, which is, well, you have to assume men are chayiv and tefillah b'tzibur, which we do assume. But with just the notion of davening with the tzibur, even if I'm not obligated, maybe there's a certain imperative there. Meaning, just because I might not be chayiv in tefillah b'tzibur doesn't mean I don't benefit from davening tefillah b'tzibur. Women benefit from davening tefillah b'tzibur. So I would say to shovel out to get to shul would be permissible. Now, in your case, if you only start salting it in the morning, I don't know if it'll help in terms of the black ice. So that's something to consider as well. But based on what we said, I think it would make sense that one could shovel their way out to get to shul. That's my personal take on it.
But
Again,
not to go somewhere else. Let's say not to go for a walk, not to go to visit your neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, again, you'll have to argue certain people who are like alone and shut-ins.
I was just going to say.
If there's like a real mental health concern of being isolated all on your own on Shabbos, then that'd be a valid basis. As I said, I don't want to give any blanket decisions, but I would say in an area like this, it's based on. Okay, maybe that's our cue. Okay, all right, but definitely, I welcome everyone to consult your local Orthodox rabbi. I'm here for you if you have any questions. And God willing, we should all stay safe, and we should all be able to get together and shul the Shabbos and Mirza Hashem. Okay, with that, I give the host privileges to actual.
Very good share.
Thank you, and have a wonderful night. The Navi shir should be starting momentarily.